It's not much of the guys who lead Ethereum and that.
Right.
So we'll get it done in 10 minutes, but
Yes.
I might flick through some slides very quickly. Right, so first of all, this isn't a complete presentation on compliance, as it cannot possibly be in a short time, but I'm going to focus on the EU, so certification within the EU, and I'm going to look at, focusing towards small businesses as well, and give a few ideas as to how small businesses might be able to achieve compliance based on a small budget. So first of all, why would you bother doing compliance testing? And besides the obvious things blowing up and customers getting killed or injured, you could get a serious fine, you could go to prison, you could have all your products recalled, so bad things can happen, but there are good things behind compliance testing, and that's ensuring that you have a good product, you build a good customer base with happy customers. So it's a good side of compliance testing, it's not all bad as well. You can go the route of employing someone to do everything, and that's for big companies. Big companies can do that, no problem. They can throw hundreds of thousands of pounds at this, employ full-time compliance testers, but a small-time business can't. To do it yourself, you're going to be distracted by the amount of work involved in doing this, but it's just part of the fun, getting something compliant. But there is a lot of information on the web, and it can be done at a relatively low cost, depending on what you're making, and that's a big dependence on that. And you may need, if you're going to do it yourself, a bit of a background in electronic engineering. So if you don't have that, you might need to get someone to help draft it in. Basic steps to compliance in the EU. You need to identify harmonised standards. These are standards that have already been defined. Some of them haven't actually, but harmonised standards that are there for existing products that define how you should manufacture them. You've got to comply with the relevant EU legislation, the directives, and you've got to test the product, both in research and development and manufacturing. And you've got to create and manage technical documentation for that manufacturing process and the R&D process. You've got to place a CE mark, and you've got to manage and log all the stakeholders. Stakeholders in this means everyone in the process. So the manufacturer, whoever imports it, they're a stakeholder, whoever sells it are a stakeholder, and they're all liable for any damages that can come from a faulty product. The more common directives that you might come across when you're trying to get something compliance testing would be the low voltage directive, the EMC directive, and the key one there, the radio equipment directive. We and Roche, you're probably not going to bump into it because most IoT devices are probably not going to be not going to require those directives. Although just do keep in mind things like lead-free salt and things like that for your Roche compliance. So you've got to make sure that some of the materials in your surface don't do lead. Generally, you can ignore we and Roche. I have a flow chart here for we, and actually you can't see it in the grey there, but there's a link that shows where that flow chart came from, and that'll tell you whether or not your IoT product needs to and same with Roche. And the likelihood is that you fall outside the scope of that. So first of all, low voltage directive. If you are powered, or your IoT product is powered by 50 volts AC to 1000 volts AC, or 75 volts to 1500, then your product should be defaulted with a low voltage directive, and it has to be tested. However, if it also has a plug, so it may be low power, but you may have to ship an adapter with it. If you have to ship an adapter with it or a plug, it does fall into the low voltage directive, even though it might be a 5 volt device or something like that. So the low voltage directive essentially says your equipment must be safe. It has to bear the manufacturer's name and address, so they can call you if there's a problem with the product. It must be supplied with instructions, so it can be used safely. And it has to satisfy the administrative requirements, and that's technical documentation related to manufacturing and things like that. And I'll go into that later on. Some of those things, the last 3 points there, are very similar to requirements in the RED directive, which we'll cover as well very soon. I'll look at my time, 5 minutes. Cheap Chinese PSUs. So if you are, and many IoT people might want to use a cheap PSU, be very careful. There's a lot of imitations out there. Very convincing imitations. You can see the circuit board on the right is an imitation, one on the left is the real one, and the difference just looking at the circuitry, the expense, and the complexity. These are Apple power supplies. They catch fire along with many other issues. But if you're going to get a power supply or something external that plugs in that you're going to buy and you're not going to manufacture, that supplier has to keep the manufacturing documentation, the test documentation, and all that information for you, and you have to be able to request that from them. Because if you can't, you're responsible for that product. So that's very important. You have to make sure that that information flows right through the supply chain. EMC directive, skipping on very quickly. So electromagnetic compatibility. So basically, in short, your device shouldn't cause interference to any other devices, and it shouldn't accept interference from any other devices. So if you switch on your IoT device in this room, all the Wi-Fi devices should shut down because your device breaks it, and vice versa. So very simple. The EMC directive excludes medical devices and a pile of other things, and they have their own directives, so it doesn't really exclude much because they're more stringent in many cases. But for basic IoT products, the EMC directive isn't actually one of the worst ones. You can get away without having a full check for EMC. The general idea is you want to demonstrate due diligence. So if there's a problem with your product, you want to be able to say, well, actually, we did this testing and we were quite convinced, and this is why we were convinced that it wasn't going to cause a problem for anyone. So really, if you've got the money, ideally, you should do a full compliance test because it's going to make the product better and you're going to be able to make sure it's safer and it's going to last longer. But if you can't, you need to, if you can't afford that, you need to exercise due diligence and make sure that's done. There's also very sourced and free information. So you can get, if you search the web and look for EMC test report, you'll find test reports from different companies that have published them online. And look for a similar product to the one you're manufacturing, pick out points and see what they're testing for. And that'll give you an idea what you need to test for that product type. And it's just a way of getting ahead, without having to research too much. You can copy from what other people are doing. Okay, let me see, where am I? Still moving on. If your IoT or product is a part of something, so it fits into another machine or something like that, or it's sold separately, there's different rules and that, but I think the company later I'll talk about. So we'll go into the radio equipment directive. So this is the big one, and this is the one really you can't really do on your own, and it falls into categories of anything below 300 gigahertz, which is basically everything. So self-testing for small business is not realistic. You should really be using your own radio module. So if you can buy a ready-made radio module from a trusted supplier, that manufacturer, that supplier can supply all the test certificates and everything related to that radio module. And if you fit that radio module exactly as per the manufacturer's instructions, then that can cover you for red. So it actually makes it much simpler versus what was there before. And again, where possible, if you're using an antenna, use the antenna that's built into the module rather than bringing it out, because again, that adds risk that you might be, doing something wrong with the antenna design, which can be quite difficult as well. Take care to choose, as a supplier that can supply the technical information. Notify or not to notify, so there's another little loophole in there as well, a bad one. If you make something that's non-standard, and it doesn't fall into any of the other harmonized standards, you may have to get a notified body to do testing for you, and that can cost lots of money. So if you're doing a standard IoT product, you're probably okay, so we'll ignore that one. Technical files, 1 minute left. So you must keep a general record of technical files, and that's everything, manufacturing, everything, and that has to be furnished. You've also got to keep it for 10 years. Okay, subcontracting, be careful with subcontracting. There's a manufacturer who's put a cheap capacitor inside a big capacitor box. Yeah. Harmonized standards, but ignore that. Declaration of conformity. Every product that's to be released within the EU must have a declaration of conformity, and the person in the company who is responsible, who is in a position of responsibility, not an engineer at the bottom of the chain, but someone relatively high up who sign off capabilities and things like that, signs this, and those are the information. That's the information that's required, and that needs to be translated into every language in the EU. But bear in mind, if you have a template, the bits you're putting in are directives and they don't need to be translated mostly. More requirements, batch and serial numbers, so I'll click on typical on your product. You should have something like this. This doesn't have the full address of the manufacturer, but it should have. But you don't have to have in every situation. If you've maybe a very small product, you can get away with saying, well, it's too small, I can't physically put it there. So then you can put it in the documentation that comes with the unit. But generally, that's what it should look like. And I've run out of time. I'll push it a chance my arm here and see how long it can go. Manufacturers, some more requirements. You need to have a user manual, and you need to tell people how to operate safely, and it must be in a language easily understood. Generally, English is acceptable, and you can get away usually with English manual when shipping within the EU. So contact details need to be marked. Again, a language that everyone understands. Importers have requirements. So if you're importing something like those cheap transformers, you're responsible for that. You bear a level of legal liability in relation to that product when you import it. So be careful that it's, and I mentioned all economic operators. Security. Be careful that your product is secure. This is an IoT fish tank plugged into a casino, and someone piggybacked on the Wi-Fi module to hack into the casino and stole a huge amount of data. That was quite recent. So make sure you've done your due diligence in relation to security. And there are a pile of EU standards. Well, not EU standards, but the EU standards are actually quite weak in terms of digital security. And Paul Miller over there, if you want to put your hand up, Paul Miller is actually working on some provisional standards and documents in relation to security that apply to IoT. So if you want to talk about that, I'll flick right through that. So there's lots of things you can look at. I'll make this available as well if anyone wants access to that presentation afterwards. Data protection, be careful if you're gathering data and it can be tied to a person, you need to apply the Data Protection Act and make sure you process data in those ways. There's other standards, they may be required, they may not be. If you're in a tender process and you're competing against other people, usually the tender will say, I want this, and this. So you will, you don't have to, but you won't get the business unless you meet certain standards. So research standards that are required. And again, to research, find a competitor's product, look at their documentation, see what standards they've got. And that's one of the easiest ways to get your product compliant. See what everyone else is doing. But don't necessarily rely on it. There's just some of the standards that you could apply to your system, and it won't even fit in the page, and it's even just one of many. Funding help, so there's Invest NI runs some key training courses on mechanical, I think electronics, so different areas. £50 a seat, and I think there's 2 coming up. There may also be funding go towards CE testing, and that'll be taken on a case-by-case basis. Be careful if you don't use stuff that's not compulsory, so find out what's compulsory. Certain things are, so the low voltage directive, the EMC, and RED, they would be compulsory elements.